taking a look at the standings as it sits right now, the Jayhawks sitting pretty. 5-1 in the conference, but right behind them, Texas Tech at 5-2, and then Baylor as well in the top 3, and TCU, unranked TCU in Texas, 23rd in the land, right behind them at 14 at 5. Time to welcome in senior college basketball writer Jerry Palm here at HQ this morning. Jerry, looking at this from a Texas Tech point of view, what does a sweep of the Jayhawks do for their resume down the line?
Oh, it's huge. And it really announces Texas Tech as not just a contender in the Big 12, which I guess you could say they already are, but it gives them 3 wins in 3 tries over the other 2 main contenders, and it sets them up for a possible run at not just a Big 12 championship, but a #1 seed in the NCAA tournament. Now, those things can still happen even if they don't win today, but today would really send a strong message to not just the rest of the league, but the country that Texas Tech is in this hunt for the long haul.
Jayhawks, by the way, they've gone 8-0 when it plays it coming at home. And then also Tech 7-3 in their last 10 games. We'll see how that pans out later tonight in Lawrence, Kansas there. Kansas, one of your top 4 projected seeds along with Auburn, Baylor, and Gonzaga. Give us a little insight about these top 4 and why they're there at this point.
Well, I mean, Auburn and Gonzaga, I think, are pretty obvious. They've been so dominant over the course of this season, and Baylor really as well, despite the 2 losses. Kansas moved up with Wisconsin's loss over the weekend at home to Michigan State, and that's not necessarily a bad loss, but the top of the bracket is just really competitive. Arizona is one of the teams that's up there competing for a spot as well as a #1 seed with just 1 loss. So, it's a really competitive top of the bracket, and any loss by any of these teams could move them far enough down that they drop all the way off the top line.
You mentioned Arizona. They're #3 in the country as it stands right now, the head of the class in the Pac-12. They won 5 in a row. Could they maybe bump into that top 4 because they do have a matchup against UCLA on Tuesday?
Yeah, well, the problem with Arizona is they've got 1 quadrant 1 win and only a handful of opportunities left on their schedule to get quadrant 1 wins. And everybody they're competing with for a spot on the top line of the bracket has at least 4. Gonzaga's the next fewest with 4. And these others are talking 5, 6, 7 quadrant 1 wins. Arizona's schedule just isn't enough, even with only 1 loss, to put them on the top line of the bracket yet. But a win at UCLA can help. But I still think that over the full course of the season, it's going to be difficult for Arizona. Their margin for error is going to be smaller than it is for the teams that they're competing with because of the lack of opportunities for the high quality wins that these other teams in the Big 12 and the Big 10 and the Big East are going to get.
Speaking of the Big East there, when you're stacking them against other conferences, outside of that, you got Providence, Nova, UConn, Xavier, all ranked in the top 25. But when you compare them to a Big 10, a Pac-12, as we mentioned, how do they kind of stack up against the others in the country?
Oh, they're almost on par with the Big 12, not quite. The Big 10, the SEC, and the Big East are all looking at maybe 7 teams in the bracket, but the Big East has only got 11 to start with, whereas the Big 10 and the SEC have 14. So that would be pretty impressive. Even 6 is a pretty good number from the Big East if it ends up that way. But right now, they've got 7 pretty solid contenders for the NCAA tournament with 7 weeks to go till Selection Sunday, and that's a very good season for this league.
Providence and Villanova, the head of the class there in the Big East when it comes to that conference. As always, Jerry Palm tapping in on College Hoops. Appreciate your time, my friend. Don't forget the Eye on College Basketball podcast. The fellas always breaking it down. The latest pod, Kentucky, Auburn, Louisville, and Chris Mack. Extended weekend takeaways of the Big Mid-Show surprise there. The fellas always down there. Gary Parrish, joined by Matt Norlander. The fellas always hooping it up with you. Download and give them a follow.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.